The Sunstone's Echo, a fantasy novella. Chapter 1. The Fading Light. Aethelgard was a land of fading magic. Once, it was said, the sky was filled with the roars of dragons and the earth thrummed with ancient power. But those days were long gone. Now, kingdoms rose and fell. Wars were fought over mundane resources, and the old magic was little more than a whisper in forgotten scrolls. In the humble, sun-drenched village of Stonefall lived a young man named Kaelin. At 18, he was quiet and unassuming, spending his days charting the winding paths and ancient forests of the realm of Eldoria. Kaelin was an apprentice to the village's wise old cartographer, a man who believed that the true power of a land wasn't in its swords or its castles, but in the lines and legends etched onto a map. One day, Kaelin was sent on a routine mapping expedition deep into the Whispering Woods, a place known more for its peaceful silence than for any ancient secrets. As he meticulously drew the path of a small, meandering river, he noticed something strange. The compass he always carried, an old family heirloom, began to spin wildly. It pointed not north, but towards an ancient, forgotten ruin hidden behind a curtain of thick vines. Driven by an unexplainable curiosity, Kaelin pushed through the foliage. He discovered a collapsed temple, overgrown with moss and forgotten by time. Inside, bathed in a single ethereal sunbeam, lay a large, smooth stone. It was no ordinary rock. It shimmered with a soft, golden light, pulsing with a warmth that felt impossibly ancient. As Kaelin reached out and touched it, the stone vibrated, and a voice, not with words but a feeling, echoed in his mind. The sun is fading. Find the heart. Restore the light. Startled, Kaelin instinctively stepped back, but the stone's light intensified, projecting a shimmering image into the air. It was a map, but not of the familiar kingdoms. It was a map of the world as it once was, filled with soaring mountains and valleys and, most startlingly, glowing lines leading to a single, vibrant point on the highest peak of the Dragon's Tooth Mountains, a place legends said was the last great lair of the dragons. Just as the vision faded, the ground began to tremble. A low, guttural rumble echoed from deep within the earth, unlike anything Kaelin had ever heard. The trees around him swayed violently, and a sense of profound power, both beautiful and terrifying, filled the air. He didn't know it yet, but the Sunstone he had found was the key to awakening the last dragon, and the tremors were the first sign of its return. This simple act of discovery had just set him on a path that would change his life, and the fate of Aethelgard forever. Chapter 2. The Rogue and the Riddle. The ground stopped shaking as abruptly as it began, but the strange, pulsing warmth from the Sunstone remained. Kaelin, his heart still pounding, carefully placed the smooth, golden rock into his satchel. He knew he couldn't return to Stonefall and pretend nothing had happened. The map he'd seen, the voice he'd felt, and the tremor that had shaken the world, it all pointed to a single, inescapable truth. His life was no longer his own. He made his way through the forest, no longer mapping, but following the faint, ethereal glow he now saw in his mind's eye, a trail that led him away from his home and towards the foreboding Dragon's Tooth Mountains. The journey was long and arduous. For 2 days he navigated dense thickets and steep ravines, his food supply dwindling and his spirit wavering. He was a cartographer's apprentice, not an adventurer. On the 3rd day, as he rested by a small stream, he saw her. She moved like a shadow, a blur of motion in the periphery of his vision. A young woman, no older than him, with a bow slung across her back and a knife sheathed at her waist. She was dressed in practical leather armor, her movements silent and purposeful as she stalked a small deer. Kaelin, clumsy and tired, accidentally snapped a twig under his foot. In an instant, she had her bow drawn and an arrow nocked, aimed directly at him. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice low and sharp, her eyes a fierce, intelligent green. Kaelin stammered, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Kaelin. I'm just a traveler. I didn't mean any harm." She lowered her bow, but her gaze remained piercing, assessing. "You're a long way from home, Kaelin of Stonefall. I've been charting the paths of these woods my entire life, and I've never seen you here. What are you looking for?" I found something," he said, and without thinking, he pulled the Sunstone from his satchel. Its soft glow immediately caught her attention. Her cynical expression wavered, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. "A sunstone," she whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I thought those were just children's tales." She was Alara, a scout for the kingdom of Eldoria, and a pragmatic survivor who only believed in what she could see and touch. To her, magic was a myth, and destiny was a fool's errand. Kaelin explained his vision, the old map, the Dragon's Tooth Mountains, the voice, and he watched as her initial skepticism turned into something resembling intrigue. "A map to the last dragon," she mused, a glint in her eyes. "Legends say the lair is filled with treasure. If your stories are true, you're the key to a fortune." Alara agreed to guide him, not out of belief in his quest, but in the hope of riches. She was the perfect companion. She knew the land, how to hunt, how to survive. Kaelin, in return, had the mysterious stone that acted as a compass, leading them deeper into the untamed wilderness. Their alliance was born of necessity, his need for a guide, her desire for treasure. But as they journeyed, a fragile trust began to form between the idealistic boy who believed in destiny and the cynical girl who believed only in herself. Their first challenge came quickly. They reached a series of treacherous cliffs, a path that was impassable without magic. But as Kaelin held the Sunstone, its light pulsed, and a faint golden path of solid light appeared, shimmering over a deep chasm. Alara stared, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and terror. "It's real," she muttered, her skepticism finally breaking. "It's a step on the path," Kaelin replied, and together they stepped onto the shimmering bridge, beginning the true journey towards the Dragon's Tooth Mountains and the ancient secret that lay waiting for them. Chapter 3. The Whispering Peaks. The shimmer of the golden bridge faded as soon as Kaelin and Alara stepped off of it, leaving them on a narrow, winding path that clung to the side of a massive, rocky cliff face. The air grew thinner and colder with every step, the wind a constant, sharp whisper that seemed to carry ancient secrets. The journey into the Dragon's Tooth Mountains was not like anything Kaelin had ever experienced. The lush greens of the Whispering Woods were replaced by jagged gray stone, sparse, hardy shrubs, and a sky that seemed impossibly close. Alara was in her element here. She moved with the grace of a mountain goat, her light armor and boots providing sure footing on the treacherous terrain. She pointed out hidden dangers with a flick of her hand: loose rocks, slippery patches of ice, and the nests of aggressive mountain ravens. Kaelin, on the other hand, was clumsy and slow. He slipped more than once, his hands scraped raw from gripping the cold stone. His mind, so good at plotting paths on a map, struggled to navigate the unpredictable, three-dimensional world of the mountains. Their dynamic had shifted. Kalen now depended on Alara completely for survival. His Sunstone guided them, but her experience kept them alive. "Your stone is a good compass," she remarked one evening as they huddled around a small fire, the orange glow a meager defense against the biting cold. "But it doesn't tell you where the best places to make camp are, or where to find water." Kalen nodded, a newfound respect for her skills in his eyes. He realized she wasn't just a rogue driven by greed, she was a survivor, hardened by a world that had forgotten magic but not its cruelty. "What about you?" he asked, watching her sharpen a knife. "Why do you doubt the magic? The bridge was real, wasn't it?" Alara was quiet for a moment, her face a mask of stone. "When I was a child," she began softly, "my village was promised protection by a powerful wizard. He claimed to use the old magic to create a shield around us. But when an invading army came, his magic failed. My parents, they believed in him. I believe in what I can hold in my hands and what I can see with my own eyes, not in prophecies and myths." As they journeyed deeper, the Sunstone grew warmer in Kalen's satchel, its light pulsing with a more urgent rhythm. It was leading them towards a massive, towering peak, the true dragon's tooth that dwarfed all the others. The air around it felt different, charged with a subtle, humming energy. It was a power that felt both ancient and dormant, a sleeping giant waiting to be awakened. They had been climbing for what felt like an eternity when they finally reached the foot of the peak. Before them, a massive stone archway, carved with faded, spiraling patterns, marked the entrance to a cave. The Sunstone began to glow brilliantly in Kalen's hands, its light painting the carved symbols on the archway. The symbols shifted, glowing one by one, and a low, resonant hum echoed from within the cave. They had found the entrance to the lair. Their adventure was just beginning. Chapter 4: The Glimmering Caves. The archway entrance hummed with a low frequency, and as Kalen and Alara stepped through, the world outside disappeared. The air inside the cave was warm and still, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and clean, like rain after a long drought. The Sunstone in Kalen's hand no longer pulsed but glowed with a steady, serene light, casting a golden hue on the cave walls. They followed a wide passage that led them deeper into the mountain. As they walked, the light from the Sunstone revealed intricate carvings on the walls, stretching for as far as the eye could see. They were not just drawings. They were stories etched into the very stone. Kalen, with his cartographer's eye for detail, was mesmerized. The carvings showed magnificent winged creatures, dragons, soaring through the skies, their scales shimmering with every color of the spectrum. They were not monsters of legend, but creatures of immense power and wisdom, living in harmony with humans and the land. In one section, the carvings depicted a great dragon, its scales like molten gold, hovering over a human settlement. The dragon was not attacking but seemed to be sharing its light, its power with the people below. The Sunstone in Kalen's hand intensified its glow, and the carved golden dragon on the wall seemed to shimmer in response. They were not monsters, Kalen whispered, tracing the lines with his finger. They were a part of the world, like the rivers and the mountains. Alara, who had been skeptical of the Sunstone's power, was now utterly silent, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and disbelief. She saw carvings of human warriors fighting side by side with dragons, a concept so foreign to her upbringing it felt like a lie. She had been taught that magic and dragons were dangerous, destructive forces that had to be contained. These carvings told a different story, one of partnership and balance. As they moved on, they found more evidence of this ancient connection. They discovered a cavern filled with massive, crystalline formations that glowed with a soft, ethereal light, the source of the caves glimmering. Each crystal contained a tiny, swirling spark of light, a remnant of a time when the world was filled with magic. Kaelin, guided by a sudden intuitive pull, walked to the largest crystal. He placed his hand on its surface and the Sunstone's light pulsed into it. For a moment, he saw a fragmented vision, a great battle, a blinding flash of light, and the subsequent shattering of something precious, scattering light like dust across the world. He pulled his hand back, gasping. The magic didn't just fade, he said to Alara. It was broken. This is all that's left. The silence that followed was heavy. They had found the historical truth of their world. The dragons hadn't abandoned the world. They had been driven from it, and with them the magic had shattered. A new path, one filled with greater purpose than just finding a legendary lair, began to form in Kaelin's mind. The Sunstone wasn't just a key to a fortune, as Alara had hoped, but a key to restoring what was lost. The treasure wasn't gold. It was balance itself. Chapter 5. The Shadow of Malachor. The deeper Kaelin and Alara ventured, the more they felt an unsettling change in the mountain's atmosphere. The ancient stillness of the caves was giving way to a new kind of silence, a watchful, ominous quiet. The glimmering crystals began to flicker more erratically, and the very air seemed to grow colder, charged not with old magic but with a potent, dark energy. As they navigated a treacherous ledge, Alara's trained eyes caught a flash of movement far below them. "We're not alone," she whispered, her hand moving instinctively to the hilt of her knife. "Riders. 4 of them." Kaelin peered over the edge. The riders below were clad in dark, polished armor, the sun glinting off their helmets. They carried banners emblazoned with a sigil Kaelin didn't recognize. A stylized silver serpent coiled around a broken sword. Alara's eyes narrowed. "Malachor's men," she said, her voice laced with venom. "They're not just Lord's guards. They're hunters, and they're looking for something." Their presence explained the strange energy Kaelin had been feeling. Lord Malachor, the powerful and ambitious nobleman, was a master of political and military power, but he also dabbled in forbidden arts. He believed that the ancient magic wasn't meant to be shared or balanced, but to be conquered and controlled. His ultimate goal was to harness the power of the Sunstone and the sleeping dragon for himself, to make himself not just a lord, but a king over all of Aethelgard, ruling by force rather than by harmony. Alara's voice was grim. "Malachor's spies are everywhere. He must have heard whispers about the Sunstone. He knows its power." Her skepticism about magic and prophecy had been replaced by a fierce determination to stop him. She saw in Malachor not a believer in magic, but a man who would use it to dominate, just as the powerful had always done. The path ahead was now not just a journey of discovery, but a race. They had to reach the heart of the mountain before Malachor's hunters did. The Sunstone felt heavier in Kaelin's satchel, its glow dimmer now, as if trying to hide from the malevolent presence that was closing in on them. As they rounded a corner, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. At the far end, a massive, ornate door stood, carved with the same spiraling symbols they had seen on the archway outside. It was the entrance to the lair. But just as they started towards it, a deep voice echoed from the passage behind them. My, what have we here? A little cartographer and a runaway scout playing at heroes. Lord Malachor stood there, not with his men, but alone. He was a tall, imposing figure, his face a chilling mask of cruel amusement. He held a staff topped with a crystal that pulsed with a cold, sickly purple light, a direct counter to the Sunstone's warmth. His eyes, devoid of any warmth, were fixed on the bag at Kaelin's side. "I'll take that now," he said, his voice as sharp as a blade. "Your little quest ends here." Chapter 6. The Dragon's Lair. Malacor's cold laughter filled the cavern. "Hand it over, boy, and perhaps I'll let you and your little thief go." Kaelin clutched the Sunstone's bag tighter. He was no fighter, but a fierce, protective instinct flared within him. This stone was more than just a magical artifact. It was the key to restoring the balance of his world. He couldn't give it up. "He's not a thief," Alara said, her hand ready on her knife. "And we're not giving you anything." Malacor's smile was chilling. "Stubborn, are we? I've been searching for a sunstone for years. It's what powers the legends, the same legends you fools still believe in. I will control this world's power, not be a servant to it, as the old ones were." He raised his staff, and a bolt of purple energy shot toward them. Alara shoved Kaelin aside, the bolt of dark magic missing them by inches and scorching the stone wall behind them. "Run! Get to the door!" she yelled. Kaelin didn't hesitate. He scrambled towards the great stone door, his hand outstretched. The sunstone pulsed with a frantic, desperate beat against his palm. He pushed the stone against the carved surface of the door, and with a resounding clank, the ancient lock disengaged. The massive door swung open, revealing a vast, dark chamber beyond. Malacor's anger erupted. "You fool!" he roared, charging forward. But Alara stood her ground, drawing her knife. She wasn't an assassin, but she was a skilled hunter, and she used the environment to her advantage. She ducked behind a crystalline pillar, using it as a shield as she flung rocks at Malacor's head, distracting him just long enough for Kaelin to slip inside the chamber. As Kaelin entered, he expected to see a magnificent creature of legend. Instead, the chamber was filled with immense, polished black stones, like scales that lay scattered across the floor. In the very center, on a raised dais, sat a large, egg-like stone, pulsing with a faint, sapphire-blue glow. It was surrounded by a strange, shimmering field of energy that hummed with power. The air was thick with the dust of ages. This was the lair, but there was no dragon. The ancient carvings on the walls told the rest of the story. They depicted dragons in a great battle against a force of dark magic. Not just any dark magic, but the very kind Malachor was using. The last scene showed a dragon, its sapphire scales glowing, sacrificing its life force to protect its unborn child. Sealing it away from the world's corruption, Kaelin knelt before the large stone, his heart sinking. It wasn't a dragon's egg, it was a cocoon, a final, desperate sanctuary created by a dying parent. He placed the sunstone against the cocoon, and its golden light merged with the cocoon's sapphire glow. Outside, Alara was doing her best to hold off the enraged lord, but it was no use. Malicor's dark magic was too strong. He disarmed her and grabbed her by the arm, dragging her towards the chamber. "The Sunstone and the dragon's heart," he hissed. "Now they are both mine." Chapter 7. Ignis. With a triumphant sneer, Malicor dragged the struggling Alara into the chamber. His eyes, fixed on the glowing cocoon, widened in greedy awe. "The prophecy is real," he whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. "The last of them." He raised his staff, its purple light throbbing ominously. "Now, give me the Sunstone, and perhaps I'll let your little friend live." Kaelin ignored him, his full attention on the cocoon. He had found his purpose. He held the Sunstone against the sapphire cocoon, pouring his hope and faith into it. The golden light from his stone merged with the cocoon's glow, and the chamber filled with a soft, warm light that pushed back against Malicor's dark magic. The great, egg-like stone began to crack, thin fissures spreading across its surface like a spider's web. Malicor, enraged, lunged forward. "You'll not awaken it. That power is mine." But just as he raised his staff to strike, the cocoon shattered. It didn't break apart with a violent crash, but dissolved into a swirling vortex of shimmering sapphire light. From the center of this maelstrom, a young dragon emerged. It was not a beast of immense size and terrifying power, but a lithe, graceful creature with scales the color of a clear night sky. Its eyes, ancient and wise, were the same vibrant sapphire as its cocoon. It stretched its wings, and a silent, resonating hum filled the cavern, a sound that spoke of mountains and stars and the deep, forgotten heart of the world. "Ignis," Kaelin breathed, as the name appeared in his mind, given to him by the gentle dragon itself. Malicor stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. This was not the monstrous creature of legend he had sought to control, but something more profound, a living embodiment of the magic he wished to dominate. Ignis turned its head, its sapphire eyes meeting Malicor's. It didn't roar. Instead, it spoke a language that transcended words, a powerful feeling that echoed in everyone's mind. You seek to own what you cannot understand. The balance is not a tool to be wielded, but a bond to be honored. Malicor, recovering from his shock, snarled. "Such platitudes. The old ways are dead. I will forge a new one." He unleashed a massive bolt of dark magic at the young dragon. But Ignis didn't flinch. As the dark energy neared, the Sunstone in Kaelin's hand flared, and its golden light pulsed out, wrapping around Ignis. The dark magic dissipated instantly, absorbed and neutralized by the combined power of the stone and the dragon. Kaelin and Ignis were now connected, their power a single, unified force. Alara, seeing her chance, twisted free from Malicor's grasp. She grabbed a loose piece of rock and flung it at Malicor, catching him in the temple and making him momentarily lose his focus. Ignis seized the opportunity. It did not attack with fire or claws. Instead, it released a silent, pulsing wave of pure, concentrated light. The light didn't harm Malicor, but it shattered the dark crystal on his staff, leaving him powerless and utterly bewildered. His strength wasn't his own. It was borrowed from the corrupted magic he had tried to control. Now that his staff was broken, he was just a man. Chapter 8. The confrontation, Malicor, now powerless and disarmed, staggered backward. The sheer, overwhelming light of Ignis had stripped him of his borrowed strength, revealing the ordinary, frightened man beneath the cruel facade. Alara, quick on her feet, snatched up a shard of broken crystal from his staff and held it to his throat. "I could end you here," she said, her voice steady and cold. "For all the fear you've spread, for all the lives you've ruined." Malachor simply laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Go on then. Do it. The world is built on power, and one day a new force will rise to fill the void. This ancient nonsense won't last." Ignis moved closer, its large sapphire head lowering until its ancient eyes were level with Malachor's. It didn't threaten him, but it spoke in the mind voice that was now familiar to Kaelin and Alara. "Power, unchecked, consumes. You sought to dominate the world, but in doing so, you became a slave to a broken part of it. The true strength lies not in taking, but in giving." Alara hesitated. Her hands were trembling. She had seen too much violence in her life to simply add to it. She lowered the shard of crystal, her initial desire for revenge giving way to something else. A sense of profound pity for a man so empty of true purpose. She and Kaelin had come to the mountain seeking a treasure, and they had found a destiny far greater than gold. Malachor had come seeking power, and had found only his own emptiness. Ignis spoke again, this time to both of them. "He will not harm anyone again. The darkness that fueled him has been scattered. The balance has been restored. And now, we must work together to reawaken the rest of my kind and bring the light back to Aethelgard." Kaelin, seeing his chance, found a sturdy piece of rope among Alara's supplies and bound Malachor's hands, making sure he was secure. They couldn't leave him there, but they wouldn't kill him either. The darkness had been defeated, but now the real work had to begin. The Sunstone, now fully awakened, pulsed with a strong, steady beat in Kaelin's hand, its light no longer a mere guide, but a source of pure, unadulterated power. With Malachor defeated and their purpose clear, the three of them, a quiet cartographer, a cynical scout, and the last of the dragons, stood together in the heart of the mountain, ready to begin the next and most important part of their journey. Their quest for the legendary lair was over. The quest to save their world had just begun. Chapter 9. The Sunstone's Heartbeat. With Malachor bound and defeated, the true purpose of the Sunstone and the dragon was at hand. The cavern, once cold and quiet, now pulsed with a living, humming energy, the kind of magic Kaelin had only read about in ancient scrolls. Ignis, the sapphire dragon, stood proudly, its very presence a beacon of forgotten light. "How do we begin?" Kaelin asked, looking from the dragon to the golden stone in his hand. "How do we bring back the magic?" Ignis lowered its head, its ancient eyes looking deep into Kaelin's. "The Sunstone is not a tool to be used, but a heart to be awakened. It has drawn its power from the echoes of my kind. Now, it must give that power back, and it can only do so through the heart of the one who found it." Kaelin hesitated. He was not a warrior or a wizard. He was a simple cartographer, but he felt a deep, unwavering connection to the Sunstone, a bond that had been forged in the forest and strengthened on the mountain. He looked at Alara, whose face was a mixture of awe and trust. She no longer saw a naive boy, but a hero on the verge of his destiny. He took a deep breath, and with Alara's encouraging nod, he raised the Sunstone high above his head. He didn't focus on a spell or a chant. Instead, he thought of the world he had charted, the lush valleys, the roaring rivers, the quiet villages. He thought of the beauty and life that deserved to thrive, and of the fear and loss that had faded with the magic. As he poured these thoughts and feelings into the stone, it began to shine with an impossible, blinding light. The golden glow expanded, flowing from the Sunstone and surrounding both Kaelin and Ignis. It was a warmth that felt like 1,000 suns, but without the heat. It was pure life energy, the same power that once sustained the ancient world. The light surged from the cavern, a magnificent golden beam shooting into the sky, visible for miles across the land of Aethelgard. It was a sign, a beacon of hope and a promise of what was to come. As the light spread, Kaelin felt a profound change. He didn't gain a new power, but felt a deeper understanding of the world. The Sunstone wasn't a source of magic. It was a heart that had connected to his own. And now that heart was beating again, sending out waves of life-giving energy. In the farthest corners of the land, dormant crystals began to shimmer. Forgotten rivers of mana began to flow, and whispers of the old magic were heard once more. The dragons, who had been in deep slumber in other hidden lairs across the world, felt the echo of Ignis, the first of their kind to be fully awakened. The Sunstone's heartbeat was the signal for their return. Chapter 10. The New Dawn. The great golden beam of light from the Dragon's Tooth Mountains was seen across all of Aethelgard. In the towns and cities, people pointed to the sky in stunned silence. In the forests, the creatures of the woods looked towards the light with a quiet reverence. A new era had begun. Inside the cavern, the light began to recede, leaving Kaelin, Elara, and Ignis in a world that felt fundamentally changed. The Sunstone, having completed its task, had settled into a gentle, constant warmth in Kaelin's hand. It was no longer a tool of power, but a symbol of the restored balance. Malachor, still bound, simply stared into the distance, his ambition and cruelty replaced by a hollow confusion. The magic he had sought to control had utterly rejected him, leaving him with nothing. Ignis, the last of the ancient dragons, turned to Kaelin and Elara. The light has returned, but the world must be taught to embrace it once more. My kind will awaken, but they will need guides and friends. The old prejudice is deep. Elara, who had once been the most cynical of the group, now looked at Ignis with a profound sense of awe and responsibility. "We can help," she said, her voice filled with a newfound purpose. "The world doesn't have to fear what it doesn't understand anymore. We can show them." And so, Kaelin, the cartographer's apprentice, and Elara, the hardened scout, embarked on a new journey. With Ignis soaring at their side, they traveled across Aethelgard. Kaelin now drew not just maps of the physical world, but maps of the restored magical currents and the places where old legends were returning to life. Elara used her knowledge of the land to forge new paths and connect kingdoms that had long been isolated. Together, they became the first ambassadors of the New Age, bridging the gap between humanity and the returning magic. They found more dragon lairs and helped awaken more of Ignis's kind. They helped the people understand that magic was not a weapon to be feared, but a force of nature to be respected. The world of Aethelgard slowly began to heal. Rivers ran clearer, forests grew lusher, and the air was filled once more with the promise of something wonderful. The story of Kaelin and Elara, of the boy who found a heart and the girl who found her faith, was told in every kingdom. And while Lord Malachor was eventually taken into custody and his dark magic erased from history, the echo of the Sunstone lived on, a reminder that the greatest power in the world is not the one that dominates, but the one that unites.